John from Heroes and Legends, and we have another day of Hour of Devastation previews to look at. Now, we're starting to wind down. Tomorrow's Wednesday. We'll have another one of these videos recapping everything we see within the next 24 hours. We'll do another one the next day on Thursday. Friday, we're going to get the full set revealed, so we'll begin our full set review beginning with all of the white cards. I'm actually pretty excited for that because this set is shaping up to be something really cool, I think. I really have been impressed with a lot of the cards we've seen, especially the ones we saw last week. Some real good ones there. We got some good ones to talk about today. Quickly before we get started, though, if you check out the description below, you'll find a couple ways to help support us, one of which is our Amazon affiliate store. If you make any purchases via any of the links there, a small percentage will come back to help support us. Secondly, you'll also find our Patreon page linked below as well. With that out of the way, let's get into today's cards. And here is Imminent Doom. This costs a red and 2 enchantment rare. Imminent Doom enters the battlefield with a Doom counter on it. Whenever you cast a spell with converted mana cost equal to the number of Doom counters on Imminent Doom deals that much damage to target creature or player. Then put a Doom counter on Imminent Doom. Alright, so other than the fact that it says Imminent Doom like 100 times in the rules text, how do we feel about this card? It's interesting. Like, it seems kind of fun. Like, I like the design. I'm kind of happy they make cards like this because I think it's cool, but I don't honestly see myself playing this most of the time in most formats. I mean, from a competitive eye, it's not a very good card, right? It costs 3, it's an enchantment, it doesn't do anything when it enters the battlefield. And then for it to really begin doing something, you have to just cast spells on curve. And even at the beginning, it's not doing a whole lot. So I have to cast a 1-drop, and then I get to do a point of damage to either creature or player. Okay, well, then when I get to a 2-drop, then 2 damage, maybe it's a little better, then 3-drop, 3, so on and so forth. But, I mean, the stars and the moon have to align for this card to ever really do anything for you. It just feels really awkward in that regard. But like I said, I like the design. I mean, if you just want to casually have fun with it and try to make it work, it just seems like a fun card to just mess around with at the kitchen table, or maybe just toss a copy in your commander deck just to have a little fun. But yeah, ultimately, I don't see this being a highly competitive card. Even within the world of limited, it's really hard to make it work for you, even in a draft or a sealed environment. Like, again, you're paying 3 for nothing, and then you have to work through that curve to make this card do work for you. You're just jumping through a ton of hoops. I will say the art is spectacular, though. They did a great job with the art, if nothing else. Next, we have a card that is a Russian language preview, and loosely translated as Maw of Chaos, 2 red and 5, Hellion 6/6. And when this enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to each other creature, and it's a rare. So, it's actually pretty good and limited, I think. Now, there might be some awkward times where it's going to do more harm than good for you, but if that's the case, you're probably already winning. This is a nice card to pick up if everything's kind of stalled out, or if you're falling behind a little bit, especially to a lot of small creatures. Later in the game, you just throw this down, start to clean up the battlefield a little bit, get yourself a 6/6. Granted, it doesn't have evasion, but still, if you get rid of a lot of the small creatures, a 6/6, even without flying or trample or anything, could still be really good in that particular board state. So I really like where they're going with this. I could see this being a relatively high pick for sure, especially if I've already decided red's going to be one of my colors. And as far as sealed goes, it's a great thing to open there as well. I think it's a little too expensive and a little too situational for, say, the standard environment, but definitely a really cool limited card. Next, we have Hour of Promise. This costs a green and 4. It's a sorcery rare. Search your library for up to 2 land cards. Put them onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. If you control 3 or more deserts, create 2 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So the first thing that caught my attention about this card was the fact that you can search your library for 2 land cards. Not basic lands, but 2 land cards. You don't always see that. Now, they do come into play tapped, but okay, that's fine. And then the rest of the card, for me, is more of just a limited, strictly appeal, I believe. Now, is this good enough to cross over into Standard? Well, I will say this. There are some interesting, unique lands in Standard. I mean, things like Westphal Abbey, for example, is the one that comes to mind the quickest. I'd also think about some of the creature lands. I mean, there's good utility lands out there that this can actually go and fetch. Actually grab you a couple of them for 5 mana. So if there is a deck at some point in the meta that's in the market to do that, well, this card's going to be there for them. It does cost 5. It's a little higher on the cost spectrum for an ability like this, I think. But if a deck is desperate enough to hit something with consistency when it comes to lands, you never know. There are some folks out there trying to brew like land-style decks for Standard, so we'll wait and see on this one. It's a little bit of a long shot, but at least it has a chance, I think. As far as Limited goes, this card, of course, becomes a lot better if you're on some sort of desert strategy and you're drafting some of the desert cards and trying to take advantage of those abilities. Then this becomes a better pick for you for sure. Next, we have Appeal to Authority. And this one I like a lot. Another real cheap, competitively costed split card in this set. On the Appeal side, it costs a green. It's a sorcery. This is an uncommon too, by the way. Until end of turn, target creature gains trample and gets +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures you control. The Authority side is a white 1 sorcery. Aftermath. Tap up to 2 target creatures your opponents control. Creatures you control gain vigilance till end of turn. So for 3 mana, you get to telegraph this a little bit, unfortunately, because it's a sorcery, but you still can attack in, give one of your things a boost with trample, tap down a couple of their things, and give all your stuff vigilance. That's actually kind of sweet. So the question is, can this find a place in Standard? I kind of hope so. Going back a few metas, I mean, there were some good Selesnya and like White Weenie style decks, and they tried to hang in the current meta, but they did get drowned out a little bit by things like the energy decks and the zombie decks and things of that nature. So if they can make a resurgence, and a card like this might be able to help them make a resurgence, then yeah, this card could see Standard play. It just depends on where the meta goes, but the raw power is there for a certain type of deck. As far as Limited goes, this card is excellent in the right archetype. Maybe I'm not first picking it in a draft, for example, but as soon as I feel pretty solidified in an archetype where I'm going wide with a lot of creatures, I'll pick this up, and I'll be super happy to have gotten it for sure. Next we have God Pharaoh's Gift. This one costs 7. It's an artifact rare. At the beginning of combat, on your turn, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. It gains haste till end of turn. So this is pretty interesting. Now you probably remember Gate to the Afterlife from Amonkhet, and there was a way to kind of cheat this into play with that card. As long as you had at least 6 creatures in your graveyard, you paid 2, you tap it, you sacked it, and then you could find this card, whether it's in your hand, graveyard, or library, and put it into play. So that is a way to cheat that 7 casting cost. However, it's not a real easy way to cheat it. It's still going to take a lot of effort to make that happen. At some point, it's probably just easier to cast it for 7. So at 7, this is a little too expensive, I think, for competitive Magic, for Standard. But it's an interesting card, and I would like to think about and I don't know, try to brew up how I could possibly abuse this a little more, maybe like Commander. What's awkward about it, here's the good and the bad, I guess. The awkward side is I could dump some really cool creatures in my graveyard to take advantage of this, but they become 4/4s. So if I'm dumping big creatures in my graveyard to try to take advantage of this particular card, I'm not going to get big creatures back. But if I'm dumping creatures that have good abilities into my graveyard, then I'm getting 4/4s with good abilities. That might be sweet, and there's probably a lot of cool things you could do with it. So I do think in Commander this has potential. As far as the limited games go, draft, sealed, it's a little expensive on the higher end of your deck at 7, but I do think it's a good card, especially in long grindy games where you're kind of in a board stall. You play this on turn 7, all the stuff that died over the course of the game starts to come back. Now, granted, only one thing a turn on your combat step, but it does have haste, so you can attack with it that time. And what's nice is it doesn't go away or anything. A lot of times when you see cards like this, the card will come back or the token version will come in one time, and then you have to sack it. That's not the case here. Those creatures do stick around. They obviously become better if you have some other zombie synergies as well. So I definitely think this is a nice pickup in Limited for sure. Hollow One. This one costs 5. Artifact Creature Gollum. This is a rare, and it's a 4/4. Hollow One costs 2 less to cast for each card you've cycled or discarded this turn, and it can cycle itself for 2. I actually think that's pretty good. I'm thinking, as far as economy goes for the card, like you're not necessarily cheating this out because most cycling cards cost 2. I mean, some do cost 1. And in other formats, there's some that you can pay life. For example, Street Wraith, I'm thinking of you. But in the world of current day Magic anyway, in Standard, the advantage of this would simply be, well, I'm getting myself a 4/4 creature and I'm cycling something for 5 mana approximately. And maybe you can get lucky and cheat it out for 4 mana and cycling something. And is that good enough? I don't really think that's good enough for Standard. I feel like it's a nice limited trick, and I'd be happy to run this as a creature in limited, especially considering whether it's draft or sealed, you're typically looking for a high amount of creatures to play in those type of decks and that gameplay style. So yeah, here's a creature that's serviceable. I don't have to worry about color requirements. And it's kind of nice to sometimes be able to cycle something away, draw another card, and still be able to cast this, not have to worry about not having enough mana to cast this 4/4 for 5. So it's a very serviceable creature in limited, not bad at all. Alright, next we have a land cycle. This is an uncommon cycle of lands. They're all deserts, and they all have a couple things in common. One of which they tap for colorless mana. Secondly, each one you can pay a life and tap for a color of each given land. So of course you see the green on your left going all the way through white on your far right there. And they each have an ability that corresponds with that particular color. So the idea behind these cards, and we'll look at each one individually in just a second, they're really meant to enhance, I think, the draft game. As far as Desert Matters cards go, these are great for Desert Matters cards. They're a way to toss deserts into your graveyard, whether it's the actual card itself or a different desert. So it helps populate your graveyard for those cards that deserts in graveyards matter, right? Or deserts in play matter. They don't slow you down while you do it. And that's what I really like. They don't come into play tapped. Now, yeah, if I want the color requirement out of it, then I'm paying a life, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But I can also tap this for colorless mana, which a lot of times is just going to be fine for you. Probably most of the time, quite honestly. And thirdly, the abilities that are tacked on, they fit into other archetypes too. So there might be other draft archetypes that are interested in picking up one or two of these, not because they're really playing around with deserts very much, but because the actual ability is helpful to them. So I like the design here. I think it's a really cool idea. So let's look at each one quickly. We have Heshep Oasis, and of course, like all of them, you can tap for colorless or pay a life for green. 2 green and 1. Sacrifice a desert. Target creature gets +3/+3 till end of turn. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So granted, it's on the battlefield anyway. Your opponent would know it's there, but you do have to telegraph it by using it at sorcery speed. So it's a thing. They're not pushing these to make them too powerful. Obviously, they're uncommons. They don't want to push them to the point where they become highly draftable first pick cards or anything. But again, if I'm in an archetype where I'm interested in deserts, or I'm in an archetype where I'm interested in potentially buffing maybe a trample creature here and there, then this becomes desirable for me. Ifnir Dreadlands, the third ability on this one is pay 2 black and 2, tap, sacrifice a desert, put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature and opponent controls. Again, activate this ability only a time you could cast a sorcery. So, again, you can't use it on the defensive or anything like that, but spreading around -1/-1 counters, that's definitely a thing that we do in draft and even sealed as well. So, again, it has a purpose other than just the deserts. Ibnu Rivulet. This one's third ability, pay a blue and 1, tap, sacrifice a desert. Target player puts the top 4 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So it's a mill card. It's actually kind of interesting, and I kind of wonder what other mill cards, if any, we might see in the sets. And in limited, again, you're going up against a 40-card deck. If you have a grindy deck, a lot of high-toughness creatures, ways to defend yourself, and a whole bunch of deserts, and maybe another card or two that also could mill your opponent, I don't know, that could be a thing that you might want to try to draft. That could be an archetype. That card is actually pretty interesting. Ramanap Ruins. This one, of course, being the one that corresponds to red. 2 red and 2. Tap, sacrifice a desert. It deals 2 damage to each opponent. That's kind of interesting, I guess, in multiplayer games. But again, this one is maybe one of the least exciting ones because the 2 damage is most of the time going to be relatively inconsequential unless you have a whole bunch of deserts in your deck. And then you can support that with maybe a super aggressive low casting cost creature strategy with maybe some burn behind it. Could be interesting, but I don't know. That might be tough to get there. And finally, we have Shafet Dunes, and this one corresponds to white. 2 white and 2, tap, sacrifice desert. Creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. So again, it would be on the battlefield. Your opponent would know it's there, but you do have to telegraph it a little bit. Feels a little expensive for the ability, but again, if you're in a deck where you have a lot of small creatures, you're trying to go wide, could definitely be worth running there. So, like I said, overall, I like them, especially for drafts. Sometimes they'll come in handy in sealed, no doubt. Don't really see them crossing over into standard play or anything like that necessarily, unless deserts are really strong and we get more support that we haven't seen yet for them, but I don't really think that'll be the case. As far as these cards go, I think they're really cool for draft, and they're also useful in sealed from time to time. Drafting any of these archetypes and being able to get a card like this, maybe even late in a pack to help bolster them, I think is actually pretty cool. I don't necessarily see these crossing over into standard or anything like that, but I love the fact that they help out with the Desert Matter stuff. I love that they help out with some of the other archetypes, and I love that they don't slow down your deck. They're actually pretty well designed. Alright, having said that, those are the cards for today. And like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll recap everything that happens over the next 24 hours. I'll give you a quick analysis of each card. And we're quickly approaching Friday, or get the full set. So until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.